Welcome to another episode of Chasing Excellence. Every week here on the show, we dedicate some time to exploring how we can live a life of better health and increased fulfillment. We answer your questions about the 5 factors of health, dive deep on living a life of excellence, and explore the strategies and frameworks to help us chase what truly matters. My name is Patrick Cummings, here as always with Ben Bergeron, and this week we've got a special guest with us. We are joined by friend of the show, Cole Sager. Fist bumps to Cole all the way out there on the West Coast. How are you, Cole?
I'm good. What's up, guys?
Oh, I'm excited to chat with you. Okay, so for the 4 people who don't know who Cole Sager is, you've been on the show before. You've been a longtime friend of the show. You are training for your 10th CrossFit Games appearance. You and Ben have worked together. Have you guys worked together for the entirety of that 10-year run, Cole?
No. I think we're on year 8, if I did math correctly, but also just
so those first 2 years, those first 2 years, we don't talk about it. Those weren't real years.
No, we should talk about that because I was like, I saw Cole in the warm-up area. Yeah. I was like, ooh, look at that. Ooh. That's a true.
Get me some of that.
That is 100% a true story. That's literally how it went. I was like,
okay, then, all right. So what was can you identify quickly and easily what that thing was that you saw that you,
I don't remember
in your life?
I don't remember what the event was. Cole can probably remember that, but in the warm up area of the CrossFit Games in, at the StubHub Center, Cole was doing like these plyometric warm ups, and he no CrossFit Games athletes were moving like a Division 1 football player doing plyometrics. So he was super explosive, and you could see the athleticism. And then that was the thing. I was like, ooh, that'd be fun. Yeah. It kind of felt like it was like the opposite of like a cheetah stalking a gazelle. Like they don't like when they see them like all prancy and all like powerful and explosive, which is why they do it. But I was like drawn to that. And then we just sat in, made some small talk. I worked with Roy Zambard, who was his training partner at the time, and there's a connection there. So that was the moment.
I knew what I was doing. Let's be honest. Like I knew what I was flaunting.
He was dancing. He was hanging by the bar, putting out the vibe.
I was practically a male peacock, just flaunting my feathers.
I love that. Yeah. All right, so we could talk about your dating history for an entire episode, but we won't. But I do want to just bring up one of the reasons that we have you on the show this week, particularly Cole. We can have you on the week or on the show anytime. But why I wanted to have you on this week is because we just announced recently a number of things. One of them being that Ben is stepping away. Speaking of coaching individual athletes at the CrossFit Games to be able to focus more entirely on building the community of CompTrain, the product of CompTrain, the brand of CompTrain, and you will be sliding in and filling his shoes. And so, 1, congratulations to you, because it's the first time I've seen you since I learned of this news. And 2, I just love to give me like both of you just like super quick thoughts on what that's going to look like, what you guys are excited about, what we can expect down the road.
Yeah, I'll start with it. It's as I started to contemplate this next move for myself, like the natural progression of those thoughts is, well, what's next for me? And then what's the right successor for this position? And I wouldn't have felt right moving on without either one of those kind of ideas a little more solidified. And after 15 years of coaching Games athletes like Cole and the people that have been, these amazing human beings that have the true privilege of being around and, becoming some, like Cole, like a best friend with, is taking those lessons, taking the things I've learned from these guys and then sharing them with the community. And that's what I'm really excited about doing next. But that's only one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is who's going to take over the lead of head coaching at CompTrain. And, when you're around Cole, he's a phenomenal athlete. I think he's going to be even a better coach. I really do. And, he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer in the CrossFit Games Hall of Fame, if that ever becomes a thing. Like, there's no question about that whatsoever. but even, if you know Cole, you know what he stands for, you know the way he communicates with other people, you know how he geeks out about the sport, you know how he's such a natural fit. And if you've been around him with the other athletes, he plays the role anyway. Like he is a coach at heart. So, is a natural sliding into place that felt so right for a big decision for me. So it wasn't something I took lightly at all, but that's felt the most ease. That was the easiest part of the whole thing.
Yeah, and I honestly kind of really directly piggybacking that last statement of you not taking that lightly. That's receiving that role is something I do not take lightly. Like I really take to heart and feel honored and respected in, because I know the responsibility that role carries and what a coach is responsible and how sacred that position is. And I'm honored by it. I'm really excited for it too. And I really do think it fits naturally into who I am as a human being, into wanting to pour into people and interact with people and give of myself, everything that I have learned, and especially, and not even just to the next generation, but to anybody around me. Like I have no problem sharing what I've learned and what I've experienced and giving that freely. And I'm excited to continue to do that. And, I do that naturally just by nature of being around a human being. So to do that in that role is going to be a lot of fun. And not to mention, I have had the best example to follow and to learn from and to be friends with. So I'm really excited
All right. Well, I, for one, am excited to see how it goes and where it goes. So okay, let's get into our episode. What do we've got this week? We've got listener questions about becoming addicted to competition, getting out of workout slumps, and how to not hijack conversations. Our workout this week is going to be a conversation about how to avoid living life on autopilot. And we will wrap up this episode with a review of how our most recent 30-day challenge went, where we aimed to walk 300,000 steps. That's different. 300 steps I would have nailed. 300,000 steps over the last 30 days. So let us get into our warm-up. We start each episode with your questions about the 5 factors of health, those few fundamental behaviors that most positively affect our performance, vitality, and longevity. Those 5 factors are how we eat, how we move, how we think, how we connect, and how we recover with each other. As we have done when we have a friend of the show on, I've cut these down to 3 questions instead of 5 questions. So we've got a question in our move category, our think category, and our connect category.
Such good ones for Cole. Samuel. Like what great, perfect categories for Cole.
Yeah. First one's from Samuel. I've been coaching in a garage gym for 5 years, and I wonder about the ever-increasing number of workouts in local competitions. Here in France, it's possible to do a competition every month if you want, and I see these amateur athletes facing 4 to 5 events or workouts during the day. We find many of these athletes become addicted to competitions and end up doing almost one a month. As a coach, I think that is counterproductive for their progress and just increases the risk of injury. But what are your thoughts? Cole's our guest. I'll let Cole go first.
Yeah. I think the obvious question or the obvious answer there is first you got to identify some goals with the individuals that are doing this. But, and then on another high level is, yes, you can absolutely compete yourself into injury. That's a very easy thing to do. Trust me. Been around that block before. So, I think identifying where an individual's goals are and being able to determine, hey, are they preparing themselves for, are they getting fit because they want to use their body? And is that just one of those avenues in which they love to use their fitness and they're just using their fitness? Awesome. Great. If that is your goal and that is your intent, go do some competitions, go hike, go play with your kids, all of those things, enjoy your fitness. But then if your goal is to be physically fit and prepared for life, if then competing starts to hinder that and you start to run into injuries and factors like that, yeah, then absolutely let's reel that in and let's bring back into focus the main goal that we had in mind in the first place.
Cole, what's your take on the number of if you were programming a competition, your local affiliate asked you, hey, we're doing a competition that Saturday or this weekend. What do you feel is because when you guys go to competition, if it's a semifinal, you have 6 to 7 events. If it's the games, you have 12 to 15 events over, 3 to 6 days. What would you say is if you were to give suggestions to affiliate owners, what do you think that What's the right amount that they should be doing?
Yeah, if we were to look at this from the perspective of we have amateur athletes or amateur professional athletes doing a competition, I would look at a 2-day competition at most and running anywhere from, I would target 6 scored events. I like the idea. I think you can get a well-rounded leaderboard with 6 scored events, but I think the elegance in programming is the importance factor there. So you're not actually doing 6 scored events. You're maybe doing 4 or 5 events, and they're just scored in an intelligent manner. So one of them being a double score, maybe even breaking one of them up into 3 50-point scores, and it gets drawn out. So because I feel like the hard part on an athlete, and the thing that I not struggle with the most, but like that I have felt that is hardest on the body, is the up and down of a competition day, to come up, to come back down, to have to come back up for different events. So if you can just have 2 or 3 times a day that you do that in a competition for individuals, I think that keeps people safe. I don't think you're overloading them too much.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I actually agree with everything you said. Shocker. But yeah,
well, I just took it from what you told me a couple years. No, I'm just kidding.
It starts with, as a lot of things, is a conversation with what's your goals. Because if a person wants to, if they're like, I just want to have fun, man, and this is like where I get it's like, it's like saying somebody that's like a skier and wants to go and enter into ski competitions every weekend, but that's where they get their kicks and their jollies. For you to go like, hey man, that's wrong, you might be like, stripping that person of the joy that they have in their life and where they find connection, they find purpose in this fitness journey. So I would just look to understand what their individual motives are, what their goals are, their reasons for signing up for so many of these things. And then you have the conversation with them, because it's the coach's job not to figure out if the goals are right or wrong, but to figure out if the pursuit is in line with the goals. And sometimes people get clouded with that for a bunch of different reasons. All my friends are doing this, like this is what, and you go like, whoa, wait a minute. I realize all your friends are doing it, but you said that your goals are X, and it looks like you're, zigzagging to Y. So that's the role of a coach. And I would just play that role for these people.
Cole, you said something. You said you could risk competing yourself into injury. And Ben, something you've said before, I've heard you say before, which is that you can compete yourself out of shape.
Yeah.
Are those two things often the same thing, or are those two separate, perhaps, dangers that somebody needs to be careful of?
From a personal experience, I have noticed that they are two different things, but they walk hand in hand oftentimes. Like they're very close cousins, and they hang out a lot. You start to compete yourself out of shape, and then it's easier to get injured. Or you have an overuse injury and you get injured. Well, look, you're not going to be doing fitness, so you're going to get out of shape as well. So I feel like they walk hand in hand and very commonly.
Yeah, there's a reason. Every sport's a little bit different. So baseball plays 162 games a year, whatever it is. Yeah. Football plays 16. Like there's a reason that they don't compete as frequently in that sport, where they do compete more frequently in others. It's an understanding of what our sport is, but even triathlon, the sport that I kind of came through my fitness journey with, if you did, it wasn't a matter of like how many you did necessarily, as long as you could check your ego, because you could use them as supported training sessions. But most people would, only do one A priority race a year, maybe a singular B event, meaning priority, and then a C or maybe 2 Cs, meaning that they would do like 4, maybe 5 events in the totality of a calendar year. Anything outside of that, you'd be at risk of potentially training yourself out of shape and, getting injury.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't say training yourself out of shape, competing yourself out of shape. That was a misspeak.
And I think a lot of that comes down to like the frequency of intensity that you're bringing to whatever sport that is you're doing. I mean, just the natural drawing and intensity of a football game. That's a lot of impact, and that's a lot of intensity that is being brought when, maybe another sport where it's just not as, golf, like sure, like you have the same movement over and over and over again, but the frequency and intensity of that is not as high every single rep. And so I think that plays a big factor as well.
Last question on this that kind of popped out at me when I first read it from Samuel. He says, we find many of these athletes become addicted to competitions. I'm curious if the two of you have seen, is that a word that you would use for folks who maybe are looking for if it's not monthly, it's, every couple months I'm signing up for another throwdown. Is addicted the right word to that? And if so, is that something that you feel like folks need to be aware of? Like you need to be aware that there are these kinds of dangers.
I would not use the word addicted. I would save that for something that is really, really challenging to stop. And when you're not doing it, consumes your consciousness. Mm-hmm. That's more of like what I would think of as addiction. And I don't think that's the case for this. I think people get in the groove of it and enjoy it, or maybe they don't even enjoy it, but they get in this cycle of it because their friends are doing it or wherever it might be. Mm-hmm. And, I don't think you have to go through an intervention to get somebody to stop this, or go to group therapy to try to stop this. It's a matter of probably a singular conversation of you said your why was this and your what's look like that.
Yeah. And honestly, the demand of life would probably very easily stop that anyway. If something else came up and other aspects of life became more demanding, it's like that would be one of the first things to fall off that person's off the table, off the plate anyway. So I wouldn't use addicted either there, but something to be mindful of. Absolutely. Yeah.
Got it. All right. Next question is in our think category. It is from Molly. She asks, what are some ways to mentally dig ourselves out of fitness or workout slumps? I just finished a big competition and was on a high coming back. I took just a few days off and got right back to work, increasing workload slightly after finding out some areas that I need to work on. Now it's been about 2 weeks that mentally I am having the hardest time finding the motivation to get back into the gym and really push myself. This is now starting to take a toll on me outside of the gym, physically not feeling great. And of course, mentally I just find myself getting in my own head. I cannot understand why I'm in this slump or what to do to get out of it. Help.
Okay.
Give me both, friend.
Yeah. So actually, literally, it's just something they just have to learn. They're learning what it means to go through a competition cycle. So a competition cycle is you train, you peak, you taper, you compete, you rest, and you recover. And I don't know how many it was Molly, right?
Yep.
I don't know how many of those things Molly did. Most people don't do that. Most people just train, compete, which it sounds like what Molly did. And it's unsustainable. You cannot do it. And the hard part is when you come out of a competition, a lot of times you're incredibly motivated and you're as fit as you've ever been. So you're like, let's ride this thing to the moon. I got all the energy, I got all the excitement, all this drive off this most recent competition. And man, I'm as fit as I've ever been. So let's just keep it going. It just doesn't work like that. That's like choosing not to sleep. It's a necessity. You have to recover. So it's called, what she's experiencing is called the parasympathetic lash-back. What's happened is she spent so much time in this sympathetic state, fight or flight, adrenaline, cortisol, epinephrine, it's all pumping through her, which is why she's so charged up, ready to go. Mm-hmm. And she just keeps going. But it's like one of those pirate ship rides at the fair that what goes swinging way far one way. I use pirate ship. It's any pendulum. I don't know why. That's what pops in my head though.
We'll go with it.
Yeah. You guys know what I'm talking about? The pirate ship ride?
Yes.
How does everybody know that pirate ship ride, by the way? It's that's such an obscure
thing. Never getting on one.
Me either.
I know that.
Yeah. So anyway, it swings up all the way to one side, that fight or flight, that excitement, that drive, that adrenaline. Well, it's got to come back. No matter how much you feel right now, you have to take the time. So Cole, we just came off of semifinals, and to walk us through what you did for let's do the 10 days post semifinals.
Yeah. So this is actually super interesting because one of the things that I think also needs to be addressed is how high the pendulum swings up. That means it also has to come back down and you're going to have almost an equal dip. So, and what I'm referring to is the intensity of and excitement of the competition. Intensity meaning not necessarily how intense the workouts are, but how much focus and passion and intent how much of yourself are you giving to that? Because if you're giving a lot, you're going to have a big slump. I mean, it happens it's why the difference of me in the open, the quarterfinals, semifinals, and games, the recovery period looks vastly different on all 4 of those. Vastly different. And so with semifinals in particular, and I think this is something that a lot of people could use moving forward for any competition, be it a weekend throwdown or getting ready for or recovering from a semifinal, is I come home and I am on cloud 9. I have just a massive amount of dopamine surging through my body, and I have all of the drive in the world to do this, that, and the other. And I absolutely want to go work out, especially after this semifinal. I've actually felt pretty good. Like I was physically recovered physically well. And so I could have gotten back into exercise really quick. What I have come to learn and find out is use that to be productive in a different way. So now I come home and I use that drive and that motivation to take a lot of notes, write things down, do some planning, and then put all that away, set it off to the side, and go enjoy and recover. Go enjoy some other aspects that maybe got neglected, time with the family, time with friends, a little bit of light fitness, something that I enjoy in the gym because I wanted to move my body, but don't bring the training intensity to things. And then when that drop comes, because I know it's going to come because it always has, and sure enough, it did, I can kind of sit in that and instead and know that my training slump is there, but now I'm going and I'm enjoying another aspect of life. I'm spending more time with my family, and that keeps me in a great, healthy mental space. I mean, to be in a training slump and instead be like, fine, I'm going to go in my backyard and I'm going to watch my son play in the sprinkler. Like, if that doesn't get you fired up, I don't know what will. Like, I mean, let's be honest. So like that was an incredible thing for me this year to feel and experience. And that took my mind off of, oh, I'm in a training slump. I didn't care. Like, fine, I know that I'm going to be in a training slump. I always kind of feel this to some capacity. And then when I started to climb out of it and I had this drive to start training again and really get after it, then I went back to my notes and I looked at what I had written down. What was I excited about? And coming off of the slump, it was easier to read those and put those in the right place to, oh, okay, like that was a little over the top. Like you were just excited coming off of competition when you wrote that note. It's probably going to look and feel a little bit more like this now that I've come down from that. So that's kind of been this method of mine over the last several years, especially as I've learned that those slumps come. And that's particularly how I approached this last semifinal.
Yeah, just to draw the parallels, if they're not incredibly obvious already, this doesn't need to be a physical competition. This could be you getting ready to launch a company. This could be you getting married. This could be you small like taking on a new job in the first 2 weeks of that new job, where anything where you have a lot of excitement and a lot of focus and a lot of, it's important to you. And that's just the way it is. Like your body needs to ebb and flow. If you're going to put a lot of effort, energy, focus, and attention into something, you need to recover from it because you can't spend huge amounts of time on that one side of the pendulum. And if you do, it leads to sickness. That's just what it does. Your body will shut you down.
I like that you guys answered that think question like it was a recover question. So good job getting another one of our factors into the show accidentally.
So what you should do is you should think of it like this. That's the hack.
Think of it like this.
Next question in our Connect bucket. This is from Jason. Do you have any advice on how to relate and keep the conversation going without hijacking it? I'm not a great conversationalist and was wondering if there are any mental cues or advice that you have to improve without hijacking.
Patrick, what advice would you have?
That's ironic that you just asked that.
So that's how you like without hijack, it's questions.
Yes.
Yep.
So, we've talked a fair amount about like, a big fan of never split the difference and using things to connect with people and make them feel heard. And we're not fans of one-upping people, which is like someone tells a story about, the fish that they caught. And you're like, oh, it doesn't have to be you one-upping them. My uncle went, king salmon fishing in Alaska and he caught, 400 pounds of salmon, actually Cole could probably tell that literally that story because all of his family does do king salmon fishing.
My whole family lineage is commercial fishermen.
Yeah, exactly. So Cole right now is like, don't say it. But but that's like, I'll throw it back to Cole, but that's my quick one is, just the hijacking usually comes when you make it about yourself. Yeah. And Cole does this so well where he asks the questions.
Yeah, and I think that as I hijack this conversation here, no, but I think that really one of the things that I try really hard, and I think that is really important, is to have the mindset and the mentality of just being the most curious person in the conversation, and like having a genuine curiosity of the person that's in front of you. And so when they start telling the story about catching a 200-pound fish, and my family lineage is commercial fishermen, and I've seen a 300-pounder. It's like
there it is. He couldn't keep it in. He couldn't do it. That was a test,
and I rocked it. No, but like instead, it's like how did catching that 200-pounder make you feel, and like being more curious around the experience of what they went through. And I think that's one of the big things that, and Ben does an amazing job. It's why like we on a FaceTime call and he probably has 30 minutes at max and we end up going an hour 15, it's because we do that to each other. And it's just like wanting to know about the feeling behind it and the experience behind it. And isn't that one of the most beautiful parts of conversing with people is if you can be that curious and that invested into the conversation that you would want to know what their experience is like. You almost get this beautiful satisfaction of starting to experience some of it as well. And now you're starting to experience the stories of other human beings. And I think that really starts to add value to your own life. And that's a beautiful thing. And I think that kind of reframing your intent of, can I be the most curious person in the conversation is an important thing.
That most curious person in the conversation, if everyone, I want to take that away and like put it, on my forehead. So I have to see that every single time I'm talking to anybody. I think that's such profound advice for anybody. That trait of curiosity is, Patrick, we've talked about this a lot in the last year or so, and it seems to be more and more the leading indicator of emotionally intelligent people, right? It's like, and it's not just asking questions. It's if you're for question's sake, but it's all those things. It's like the humility of like, this isn't about me. There's that saying, which is like, if your mouth is moving, your ears are closed, and your ears are closed, you're not listening. If you're not listening, you're not learning. That's not the saying, but you get it.
No, you just made that.
I totally made that up, but like,
but that was
which I don't totally agree with.
You almost sold it.
I could have. Yeah. It is now.
Yeah.
There's going to be a meme about it soon. So, but that idea of like, you learn by listening, not by speaking. We've talked about this, Patrick. I don't totally believe that. I think you can formulate a lot of thoughts and frameworks by speaking them out loud. I think there's a lot, the greatest student is the teacher, because you're like, oh, this works, this doesn't. Having said that, there is a lot of power, especially in relationship building, when you are the listener. And I really like the idea of, if you leave a conversation and you feel like you probably didn't talk a lot, the other person probably thinks you're a very good conversationalist.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And if you are the one doing the talking, because it's like you feeds the ego. It feeds like it feels good. It's like you're probably not coming off as great a conversationalist as you could otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So now no one's going to talk for the rest of this podcast.
I know, seriously. It's ironic that on a podcast.
Yeah.
There's a book that I didn't read the book, but I read an excerpt from the book. The author's name is Dan Lyons. The book is called Shut the F Up, The Power of Keeping Your Mouth Shut in an Endlessly Noisy World. And so I read an excerpt. It was in Time magazine, and I just found it because so what he did is he realized that he was having this issue. He talked too much and it was causing all sorts of problems in his professional life, in his relationship, et cetera. So he started doing some digging to figure it out. And he discovered that there is a thing called talkaholism, right? Much like alcoholism. And so the book is sort of, again, I didn't read it just from this excerpt, what I'm gathering. It's kind of his exploration of like what to do now that I've identified myself as a talkaholic. And he writes, I developed guidelines for myself and started practicing them. I bailed out of social media almost entirely. I trained myself to become comfortable with uncomfortable silences. Before picking up the phone or getting on a Zoom call, I took deep breaths to slow myself down, using the heart rate monitor on my Apple Watch to see whether it was working, and jotting down notes on the purpose of this conversation so I could stick to the agenda. During the call, I would lower my voice and slow my cadence, et cetera, et cetera. I asked my kids open-ended questions, then sat back and let them speak. Officially speaking, we were quote unquote having a talk, but in truth, I was having a listen. So I just wanted to bring that up because that echoes what kind of you guys are talking about, but maybe a little bit more prescriptive. But well, what can you do if you find yourself the kind of person who perhaps hijacks conversations too much? Because it's not probably enough to just say, stop doing that, right? Like many things, like you've got to have a replacement action to change course a little bit. And so I just like that as here are a couple of things that you can try if you find yourself hijacking conversations or talking too much.
Yeah, I really like the I just blanked on what he said at the very end there. Open-ended questions.
Open-ended questions with his kids.
Yeah,
yep.
Open-ended questions. Like that's such a great, and it's the hack to your kids. Like, how was school today? Terrible question.
Yep.
What did you do at school today? Better question. It's just the simple things like that. And it's the same thing in coaching, by the way. It's the exact same thing. We stopped asking like, how are you feeling today? Because everyone would say pretty good. There's like defaults, like no matter what they were feeling, whether they were like smashed and crawling to get to the gym or they had all the energy in the world, it was always pretty good. So we started asking, much more prying questions to try to get the right information out of them. On a scale of 1 to 10, where's your energy level at? Where's your excitement to train? Where's your soreness? And tell me a little bit more. Tell me why, all those things. So I love the open-ended question ones. And then I also we talk a lot about awareness, intention, action. I think the awareness thing here is, I just did it, is how often are you saying one of the most spoken words in the English language, which is I. And it's about me. And what, if we were to sit in a cocktail party and kind of, because the three of us go to so many cocktail parties. Yeah, if we were to,
I'm going to one now. Yeah. After this,
I'm at one right now.
One.
Yeah. But that's a lot of what happens is people just take turns telling the stories about themselves. And if we being the listeners and us could just have a level of awareness of that default mode and challenge ourselves not to follow suit with now it's my turn to give the I story, but instead, as Cole said, be the most curious person in the room and ask them questions about like, how that make you feel to be able to catch a 200-pound fish, even though my uncle caught a 300-pounder.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, but I wasn't going to say it out loud.
Yeah,
even though I did.
You did though.
I know.
So Cole, how'd that make you feel when you actually said that out loud?
Dominant,
you make me think about There's a book called The Coaching Habit. I've mentioned it before in the show by Michael Bungay Stanier. And he's got this great thing in there. He calls it the awe question, AWE. And he simply says, ask what else? Ask what else? Or I think that's what it is. Oh no, it's and what else? And what else? And if you just ask that question at the end of that, or at a point in that conversation where it feels like, okay, maybe now I speak now, just like, and what else? And let that other person bring that back and see where it goes. Yeah. I think is really powerful.
I think one of the other things that we need to remember too, when we're conversing with people and we're in conversation, visiting with people is, people are a lot more gracious and lenient than we might think they are. And oftentimes the awkward silence is something that we're more uncomfortable with than they would be. And so giving yourself and trying to remind yourself you have the space to correct yourself in the moment if you so choose. So if you catch yourself hijacking a conversation and you are dominating conversation, you have the space. If you want to, once you realize it, stop and pivot and say like, hey, like, sorry, I realize that I'm dominating the conversation, or however you want to word that. Then ask a question to somebody else. Have you experienced that as well? And then give somebody else the floor, but to train the mind of, hey, I'm experiencing this real time. Stop it there, because that's going to help rewrite that moving forward, and you're going to be able to see that more and more frequently, and faster in future conversations.
Love that.
Yeah,
All
really
right,
good.
let's wrap it up there. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, everybody out there, for sending us your questions. If you would like to get one in the queue, find me on Instagram, PS Cummings. Drop me a DM. I'll add it to our list. Cole, Ben, and I will be back shortly with our workout where we are going to talk about living life on autopilot. We're brought to you this week with support from the fine folks at BetterHelp. Are you feeling overwhelmed with the demands of life? Do you struggle to find balance in a world filled with stressors and FOMO? We all experience difficult times in our lives, but the good news is that help is available. Head to betterhelp.com/excellence to learn more about how online therapy can be convenient, flexible, and on your schedule. BetterHelp is an online therapy platform that connects you with licensed professionals who can help you achieve mental and emotional well-being. With BetterHelp, you can access therapy from anywhere at any time. All you need is an internet connection. Therapy can be an essential tool in achieving balance and improving your quality of life. Whether you're dealing with anxiety, depression, or just need someone to talk to, BetterHelp's licensed therapists are here to support you every step of the way. So why wait? Take the first step towards a healthier, happier you with BetterHelp. Sign up today and receive 10% off your first month of therapy. Remember, you don't have to go through difficult times alone. Just go to betterhelp.com/excellence, get started, and take the first step toward feeling your best. That's betterhelp.com/excellence for 10% off your first month. All right, we are back. We've got a question from Megan, and she asked, I recently heard Ben mention that most people often go through life on autopilot. I was wondering if you have any input as to how to stop doing this in my day-to-day life. I can feel myself doing it and recognize it, but I'm unsure how to stop when the day-to-day activities remain the same.
Okay, so there's a difference between routine and a pre-programmed consciousness, which is what we're actually talking about here. So going through on autopilot means like I don't have to think about when I brush my teeth. I can tie my shoes without using up energy. And I've created that habit in the routine where it can be done subconsciously. Scary enough, some of us can actually even drive to work kind of subconsciously. It's like, I don't even know if I stopped at that red light, but you get to there and you're like, you're there. And that's because it's just so like we're on autopilot. That's not what we're talking about here. That is energy conservation. And once you learn a movement pattern well enough, you no longer have to put effort towards it. Your body will just naturally go through it. What we're talking about is like the human operating system, which means not only when you tie your shoes, will you always do the bunny ears or the loop and swoop or whatever it is, and you won't deviate away from it because that's your default mode. It's understanding that we are on autopilot from our triggers, our personality traits, and the things that get us emotionally, physically, and mentally rattled. And those are the things that we need to get off of autopilot on. So case in point is if your wife asks you to take out the trash and you get bugged by that, that's probably because there's some sort of pre-programming that's been ingrained into you from your past where your father resented your controlling mother, right? And that's an extreme example, but that's what we're talking about. It's not that your wife asks you to take out the trash is this big thing at all. It's that you're operating on autopilot and you are a slave to the circumstances around you, meaning anyone can kind of trigger you and get you to act in any sort of irrationally emotional way by simply the words or their actions that they say. And if we can pop up above that and recognize what are we reacting to in certain ways, we have a thing that, that we work with all the time. Cole knows this. We started this, year one is don't be reactional, respond. And that's the difference. Reacting is you on autopilot. It's your impulses, it's your emotions, it's the sequence of there is a trigger that happens that causes a conscious or subconscious thought, which leads to an emotional reaction, which causes a physiological change in the body. That is the sequence of events that goes. Then from there, you get in this thinking, feeling loop, and now you're trapped in the maze. What we need to be able to do is pop up above that, see over the trees, and understand what it is that is actually triggering us. What is the thing that is actually controlling us? And if it's not, I'll just give some of these. It's a coworker saying something that you get like enraged by. Well, that's your coworker. That's on you. We should be able to walk through life. I'm not saying being like monks or robots, but we don't want to be swung side to side and by any little breeze in the room. We want to at least be like a rigid oak that can withstand some pretty strong winds. So when those winds come at us, we are centered and we are grounded. If we are not centered, meaning we get pushed from side to side by any little thing that's not in line with our expectations, we don't have the opportunity to live as productive, meaningful, happy, joyful lives as we otherwise would, because to get from point A to point B, the fastest way to get there is a straight line down the center. You don't want to smash into the walls along the way. And if you're on autopilot, this is what's going to happen, because we all have, even the most cared and loved for among us, have these weird things from our childhood that, if we don't recognize them, have programmed us to respond in certain ways. And what I mean that is like program, like if I hit my keyboard on a computer, if I hit the M button, an M pops up on the Word document. That is a program that the computer is running, meaning there are inputs and known outputs. What we want to be able to do is take control of that and go, I don't need to be a slave to these inputs. I have control over my own being. And if we have that, we take onus over our lives. We take onus over our lives, and we have the ability to do what we want to do in this community, which is to recognize, what is chasing excellence mean to you? To me, it's about living a life that when I get in my deathbed, that I know that I gave everything I have to the things that are most meaningful to me at that moment. And this is my biggest, greatest fear, is I'm pouring energy and attention into things that ultimately don't matter. That's a form of hell to me, is like working your ass off for things that don't matter. Well, one of those forms of working your ass off is unnecessarily getting rattled and emotionally spent by things that don't really matter. So this gives us a level of perspective on how to navigate life in the most productive way possible.
I think one of the things that you talked about that I really liked was that I wanted to piggyback off of is some of the things that have been pre-programmed from childhood that are maybe still even driving factors for us now. But if I was to relate that to the sports environment, which is, a great test, like we can learn a lot through sports and in our time training in the gym and things like that. But if I was to always say like, hey, I played 14 years of football and that pre-programmed all of these things into me, and this is the way I am, and that's how I operate as a CrossFit athlete now, I would not get very far as a CrossFit athlete. So I've had to take the time to, over these last 10 years, reprogram a lot of those things, those training adaptations and behaviors and routines that I had from playing football, reprogram those into new programs that I follow and want for my sport now. So anyways, that point being that like every interaction that we're going through now is a training environment for the next one. And so if we're having the training, like we need to bring awareness to that, so that if we're understanding and seeing that, hey, we're responding in a way that like after the fact, you just did not feel good about, like that is a chance to correct it, be it after the fact or the next interaction. But now, it's like, if I if I'm doing a snatch session and I miss a bunch of reps and I don't hit the percentages that I want to, I don't really get to just redo that session that day. I have to take notes, think about it, ponder it, and bring that intention to the next session. Well, we need to do that every time that we see ourselves going on autopilot. We're reacting to things in a negative way, and we're things are ticking us off and whatnot, and making us feel, or even our actions we feel guilty about or kind of shameful about. Bringing awareness to that, drawing attention to it, learning from it, and then bringing a really good intention to the next opportunity, I think is a really good way to rewrite those programmings as well.
Yeah, I love what you said. The word that you use there more than once, Cole, and you were using it in a training example, but it's the word adaptation, right? It's about you adapting and becoming a better version of yourselves. Like, we can't rewrite the past. We have very little control over the reality of which we are presented right now. But if we are learning from those circumstances to become a more formidable version of ourselves, we're going to be set up better for the next one. And it's just this constant loop of like, learn, iterate, build, just kind of like learn, iterate, and build. Like, let's just kind of like make it better, knowing there's no such thing as perfection. But it's that idea, we're going through a period of change right now internally. Patrick, you just announced that I'm stepping away from coaching games athletes. We're, I don't want to say completely rewriting our platform, but we have a new app releasing. There's always going to be hiccups and struggles with the whole thing. If you find yourself getting anxious or anything that's causing any sort of levels of stress or anxiety, that should be instead of letting it trigger you into what normally happens, which is I feel stressed, now I'm upset, and this feeling loop that goes negative sewer cycle. You want to recognize, that feeling. Do I have awareness in real time of that feeling? Take the time, take the space, as Cole just said, so that you're better for it the next time, and you'll recognize it even faster the next time. It's not the fastest. It's not the strongest. It's the most adaptable to change. And change is the only constant. There's no such thing as constant in this world at all. In 90 days, every single cell on your body is going to be gone, replaced by a new one. Like, the whole thing is changing all the time. Even the things that we think are constants are not. So the best thing that we can do is be aware of those things that are pulling us down, holding us back, or keeping us from being the version that we want to be, and then lean into that version that we want. There's this cool saying, I think it's Springsteen, but he said, Bruce Springsteen, who's just awesome. If I could be any musician ever, that's who I would be. Who would you be, Cole? If you could be any musician ever, who would you be?
I love Steve Perry's voice, man. I just want to be able to belt it like Steve Perry.
Who's Steve Perry? I don't know who Steve Perry is.
Wow.
From Aerosmith.
No.
Journey, right? Guys.
Oh,
Journey. Who's
Joe Perry? Joe Perry is the guitarist for Aerosmith.
Okay. Oh, no kidding. I didn't know.
Yeah. That's who I thought of. Yeah. Oh, that's a great call. Patrick, any musician?
Bob Dylan.
Ooh.
That makes a lot of sense, Patrick. Okay. What was I talking about?
I have no idea how we got there.
What did I say? Oh, Springsteen. Yes. He said there's a time. There's a time when you have to decide that in order to be the man you want to be, you got to start being the man that you want to be. And that's the opposite of pre-programming, right? Pre-programming is just like, this is the way I act. This is the way I do things. This is I love one of them. I think is one of the coolest things there is are generation breakers, which means there are people that like this cycle of like child abuse or a cycle of crime or a cycle of drug addiction. And then it's like, because that's the environment I grew up in. It's the environment that the parents grew up in. It's the environment that the grandparents grew up in. It's like this cycle. Well, there's a time that you decide that you want to be the man or woman that you want to be. And the way you do that is by being that person. It's taking ownership and responsibility and acting in those ways. And the people that break the program, that's one of the most upstanding, heroic things that I think a human being can do, because that furthers generations forever, because now they're creating the more healthy cycle for everybody.
Totally.
One of the things I was thinking about in advance of this chat, just about this question, is this is cool. This is not where I thought the conversation would start. But what I was thinking about was like, okay, when we're on autopilot, just think about any one of our 5 factors, maybe like, a relationship or even work, or like there's all these kind of contexts in which sometimes we fall into what we could call autopilot. And so I was just thinking about like, what is that about? Where does that come from? And to me, I think part of it comes from this process of habituation that we're all, or it's kind of built into us, right? Habituation being like our ability to filter out the irrelevant information.
Who you
so that
calling
we can
a
focus on
bitch?
So that we can focus on the relevant information. And like, so the silly example that I always think about with this concept of habituation is like you paint the walls in your house a new color. And for a week, every time you walk into that room, you're like, ooh, I love this color blue. And after 2 weeks, you're like, every once in a while, you're like, I still really like this blue. And then 3 weeks in, you're like, you don't even notice that it's blue anymore because your brain no longer needs to focus on that information. And so I was thinking about that in relation to autopilot. And I thought, well, what is the break of that sort of habituation? And it's the same thing that happened when you painted the walls, which is that something has to be different. Something has to change. And it's in the changing that we begin to notice again. Mm-hmm. And so if autopilot is to a degree, and I like what you were saying to start this, Ben, where this sort of like this trigger and automatic response. And so if we want to change that, there is a degree to which we need to change something, because we can't just will our way into seeing the blue wall again. Right. It's just it's not how our brains work. Right. So we need to figure out, okay, in this, like, in this relationship that I have that I feel like I'm on autopilot in, what can I change? What do I need to change so that my brain kicks in again? And so that I start to pay attention to it in a way that it feels like I'm no longer paying attention. And I really like where you started this conversation, Ben, because that is in many ways, like, that's the answer. It's the awareness. And then it's the recognition that for me to get out of this autopilot, I have to introduce the opposite of the habituation, which is novelty. I have to introduce some amount of novelty to this so that I can kick myself out of autopilot. And to me, that was actually kind of eye-opening. I'd never really connected those things before, because I think like all of us can fall victim to or be guilty of autopilot in places that I shouldn't be autopilot. And it was actually a light bulb to think like, oh, that's how you get out of it. That's the process, is that you have to go in and you have to change what has been unchanging. I
really, really like that, because I experienced this in my own life in the last couple of years after having our firstborn, having our first son. I only have one son, but having our child, Genesee and I used to go on afternoon walks all of the time. It was our place to connect and be with each other, and to really give each other space to be heard, and just connect. And when you have a kid, now your life is focused on that. And so our afternoon walk times, well, that now started to revolve around his nap time. And so we're inside around the house because he's napping. So we're not getting, that same time and availability. And something that we started doing was just going outside in the morning while he's still asleep and drinking our coffee on the porch, away from screens, away from the computer, which is, we would normally, especially you guys are all on the East Coast, and like you wake up and you start sending things. And so like when I wake up, it's like I have an inbox full of stuff, And
he's not talking to you, Ben. That is not a reference to you.
No. But it was really easy, when we didn't have a child, to wake up and like, hey, let's get after the day, get into training, especially with like, I want to get to training Like, hey, let's knock out a bunch of emails and responses and whatnot, so I can just get that done and out of the way, and it's not checked, but like, I can put that to the side and focus on training. Anyway, we had gotten into the habit of waking up, opening the computers, doing a little bit of work, and we had to add in order to create that connection and find another place for that connection, we had to create something new. And so it's like, leave the computers down, don't open them, just leave them off. Go step outside for a few minutes. And that few minutes of like, let's just go step outside for a few minutes turns into 30 minutes of connecting and being with each other and hearing each other. And anyways, that novelty is something that created that space again for that. That was just, again, a real world example that we experienced. That was beautiful. That
understanding, Cole, that, we're missing that connection piece that we used to have. As Patrick said, the wall's blue now, and I'm paying attention to it and the focus. It starts with our first of 3 guiding principles, which is awareness. Mm-hmm. And this is the challenge. Like this is, it's not going to happen without awareness. It's not going to happen until you go, we should paint that wall. Like the wall doesn't just get painted. It doesn't go to action, It doesn't go just like you guys just, instead of having your computers open, to being on the back porch listening to the birds in the morning with your coffee. It doesn't just happen that way. We need that level of awareness, and that level of awareness, this is where these practices come in that we've talked about, and we're not prescribing any of them because they're not necessary, but they are tools. And the reason these tools are in place is because they help create awareness. It's things like journaling, reading scripture, spiritual stuff, stillness, nature, space, where you can actually get away. Because if you're in this constant state of noise, you're in a constant state of distraction. If your entire life is autopilot, then you have no opportunity to actually sit and kind of like listen to the things that like, ooh, that was weird. Ooh, this might be more in line with my values. Oh, this might be the big brave thing I can do tomorrow. Like those things take levels of awareness. And then we know that the next one after that is intention. Tomorrow I'm going to shut down the computer and get the coffee. Tomorrow I'm going to paint the wall blue. Tomorrow I'm going to do that big brave thing. And then the third one, awareness, intention, is action. If you talk about it, like there's like a level of like, I'm going to call it like spiritual egoism, right? Which is like, I feel good because I spend so much time meditating or journaling, scripturing. And I have like all that kind of like, I feel so like I'm a little bit better than other people. Yeah. But if you never take the action, if you're not actually a better person, what's
the point?
What's the point? Yeah. Now, I'm not gonna say what's the point, because at least we're stepping. Sure. We're at the precipice. We're at the doorstep. You have the awareness. You have the intention. Yeah. We haven't gotten the action to happen yet, but we need to take the action. And I'm a big believer of don't wait and wait. Take the steps. I say, jump and grow wings on the way down, build, measure, learn, like just go and do the thing. You'll have more data points and you can make better decisions from there.
To wrap up. Thank you, Megan, for your question. Cole, Ben, and I will be back in just a minute for our cool down. So stay tuned. All right, we're back. We got a cool down. We are wrapping up our latest and greatest 30-day challenge, where we were aiming to get 300,000 steps over the last 30 days. That averages 10,000 a day. I have no idea how the two of you did, so I'm going to go with I'll go with you first, Ben. Give Cole a minute. How'd you do? How'd it go?
This is the best challenge that we've ever done, and it might be my favorite challenge that I've ever done. This was like a game changer for me. Like Cole knows this. Like when we went to semifinals in Pasadena, California, we rented a car and I didn't get in my car the entire time.
Amazing.
Good for you.
It was like I walked to work one day, which is almost 4 miles.
You did
do that. Yeah. It was because the day I was traveling. Where was I going? I had to drive up to Vermont. So I knew it was going to be in the car for a lot. So that morning I just walked, I got all my steps in. I go for walks in the morning. I go for walks at night. And what I realized that when we talked about this earlier, I was like, it's easy. It's not easy. It doesn't just happen. It happens on the days that I'm active and busy and walking around. But there is a lot of days where I don't get in the steps. And you have to be very, like if you haven't done this before, anyone out there that hasn't done this before, I equate it very much to doing macros. It's something that you normally do, no pun intended, but like on autopilot. It's just a part of what you do, and you think you're doing it right. You think you're being active enough, and all of a sudden you go like, "Oh my gosh, I'm only getting 90 grams of protein. Oh my gosh, I'm getting 200 grams of fat." Oh my gosh, I'm only eating. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm eating this much. It's not something I think you need to do forever. But it's such an eye-opening experience to track this for a period of time. So I passed. I did the 300,000. Mostly, when I was out in Pasadena, I was getting almost 20,000 steps a day. Yeah. So that helps a lot. Yes. And I only missed I missed 2 days of the 10,000 a day, but I overloaded it with the others.
Can I just say, in Pasadena, there was actually I noticed a difference in Ben because you walked as much as you did. It was a really cool thing. There was a kind of a lightness or a brightness, a focus that almost like that could almost feel off of you. And I mean, there's a handful of times where like, hey, we're going to go here. Do you want to come? Like, no, I'm going to walk there. I'll meet you there, and it was cool. But he just had, and what I wonder is it because there is this level of intention that you have to bring to getting that many steps in a day on a regular basis, day over day, is being aware of that, go back to the awareness thing, but being aware of the intention that you have to bring to make that happen. It creates an awareness of intention to other aspects of your life as well. And that's what I experience whenever I'm trying to do something of that nature, and hit the steps and whatnot. It's like, it's a level of intention that I have to bring to that then bleeds into other areas of my life of like, it helps me bring intention to other aspects of my life as well.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Patrick, how'd you do?
Simply, but I did okay. I did not get the 300,000, but I did go past. So my original goal, if you remember, Ben, my original pitch to you was 270. Yeah. And so I got 280. So I got a little bit better than what I had been averaging. So not an A+, but honestly, it came down to like, I needed a few days of like 20 and I had too many days where it was like 6.
Yeah.
This is something, this whole thing started for me, a couple months ago, and it started after reading the Sturrett's book. And so to me, this is just like a cool continuation of something that I'm trying to make a genuine and complete part of my life. Yeah. And so I think, like we've talked about with challenges, is like, they're great if you focus on them because they'll kind of change where your default state is, even if just a little bit when you kind of come back down from it. And so my hope is like this changed my default state just a little bit, but I'm just going to take that. I'm going to keep on going. I'm going to aim for this number to go forward. So I'm still such a big fan of it, but yeah. Cole, what about you? You were in the midst of training for all this. Were you able to even focus on this at all? Did you care about this? Did you try?
This actually, I had the longest 10,000 step day streak that I have had. And I've had my Garmin watch for 8+ years or something like that. And so to create the longest streak that I've ever had within that was kind of cool for me. But it was the same thing. I had to bring intention. I have, by the nature of training days, I have high peaks and low valleys. Like, my Thursday is, actually Thursdays tend to be pretty good because I'll try to go for a walk or something. But Sundays, it's like, you walked 1,000 steps? What?
It is eye-opening.
You went to the bathroom?
It's eye-opening how little, like, it's that. Yeah. It's like the awareness of like, whoa, when I come to the work and just sit at my desk and get up to go to the bathroom and get some lunch and, go converse with someone down the hall, it's a sedentary lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yes, you're doing CrossFit, but that CrossFit might be 20 minutes. It might be an hour. That's not enough, I don't think, for the totality of health.
No. So I was able to hit it. And it's in totality is just over 300,000 for myself. But I had peaks and valleys, you know, a couple 25,000, 30,000 steps because I went on a run and stuff, but it was fun. It was fun.
Cool. All right. We're going to wrap it up there. Thank you everybody out there for listening. Cole, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Look forward to seeing what you guys do with CompTrain. Thank you everybody out there for listening. Thank you for your ratings and your reviews. Ben and I will be back next week for another episode of Chasing Excellence.